Okay, so we're diving deep today into Jeff Goins' The Art of Work.
Yeah.
And we're really going to try to hone in on those nuggets of wisdom
Yeah.
about, finding and calling that thing that really gives you a sense of purpose. You know what I
Oh,
mean? We're going to
absolutely.
do it always, specifically for you listening right now.
Right.
So the material is really rich. We've got stories. We've got personal reflections. Uh, we're going to look at how we kind of listen to the whispers of our own lives, right? The teachers that kind of pop up in unexpected places. The role of practice, 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 even when it's hard.
Right.
Taking leaps and learning from those, stumbles along the way.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, seeing our work, not just as a job, but this kind of, portfolio, this collection of different things.
Yeah, more holistic, right?
Yeah.
Not just this one track kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not going to be a strict step-by-step plan.
Yeah.
It's more like we're going to kind of walk through these different experiences.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll illuminate your own unique path.
I think that's a great way to put it. Goins really emphasizes that it's not a paint by numbers sort of process to finding your calling, but rather about recognizing the elements that often come into play as people kind of, move towards more purposeful work.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the first things that really jumped out at me was this idea of listening to your life. And Glenn's makes this point that what we're called to might not be this, brand new thing that hits us out of the blue,
Right.
but maybe something that's been there all along.
That's so true.
It's like this quiet little thread
Yeah.
running through our experiences. He even shares his own story about becoming, full-time writer on his 30th birthday.
Oh, yeah.
But what really struck me was that he focused more on the journey leading up to that moment.
Interesting.
It wasn't just about the event itself, but that whole process of realizing where he needed to be.
And that's a really crucial distinction, because it shifts the focus away from this idea of a sudden epiphany and more towards this kind of gradual unfolding.
Yeah.
It's more about, paying attention to those breadcrumbs along the way, the things that consistently, spark your interest or give you energy rather than waiting for this, big dramatic sign to drop from the sky.
And it made me think about, those times in our lives where we encounter unexpected twists and turns, like roadblocks.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the story of Garrett Rushmiller comes in, the triathlete who developed this brain tumor.
Right.
His dad, Eric Miller, has this perspective on focusing on what Garrett could still do.
Wow.
Instead of, dwelling on what he couldn't.
That must have been so difficult.
It is incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It's like he refused to be consumed by what was lost.
Yeah.
And instead looked for those glimmers of possibility.
That letting go of the what ifs, that's such a profound lesson in resilience.
It really is. It's easy to get caught up in all those imaginary scenarios.
Oh, absolutely.
But Eric Miller kind of cuts through all that and says, hey, this is the reality and we're going to deal with it.
So true. And for you listening, this really highlights how our idea of a meaningful life can be completely challenged when we face those really tough situations,
Right.
But instead of getting stuck in what's lost, we can actually find unexpected ways to make an impact when we focus on those present possibilities.
Yeah, and it's not just about, helping ourselves, but rippling out and impacting those around us too.
Exactly.
And then the book takes this even deeper with Eric Miller starting to think about what wouldn't have happened if Garrett hadn't gotten sick.
Interesting.
Their family's foundation, the support they were able to offer others, even Eric connecting with people in the ICU. And none of that would have happened without this really difficult experience.
It completely flips the script, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you look at things in a whole new light.
Yeah. It makes you wonder, has there ever been a time in your own life where something that felt totally negative at the time ended up putting you on a better path?
It makes you think, And then we have Larry Elliott, who sold his whole insurance business to dedicate his life to helping children.
Wow.
There's this real sense of urgency in his story, especially when you hear about him writing letters to his kids before having cancer surgery.
Oh, wow.
It's like this stark reminder to live in alignment with your purpose, to know what truly matters.
It really makes you think about your own priorities, doesn't it?
Yeah, what would you say if you knew time was limited?
Right.
And, speaking of finding guidance in unexpected places, that brings us to this idea of accidental apprenticeships.
Oh, okay.
It's like we often learn the most valuable lessons from people we wouldn't necessarily think of as mentors, right?
Yeah.
And the book starts off with this kind of sobering statistic. It says that something like only 13% of people feel actually engaged at work.
Oh, wow. That's pretty low.
It is. It's like most people are just going through the
Which
motions.
makes you wonder why, right?
Yeah. And this is where Viktor Frankl's insights become so relevant. Remember, he was the guy who survived the Nazi concentration camps.
Right?
And he said that even in those horrific circumstances, meaning came from three things: having a project, something to work towards, having strong relationships, and finding a way to see suffering as redemptive.
Wow.
I mean, even in that situation, having something to live for, like his manuscript or the hope of seeing his wife again, that's what kept him going.
That's amazing. It makes you think that maybe that low engagement at work is because people are missing that deeper sense of meaning.
Yeah, like they haven't found their project.
Exactly.
And that brings us to Jody Nolan. She ran these letter writing workshops, but after her stepson died, she stopped.
Understandable.
Yeah, it was too painful. But then, get this, her workbook ended up helping the dying mother communicate with her daughters.
Oh, wow.
And that moment reignited her purpose. It wasn't about, you know, achieving some huge level of fame or success. It was about that deep personal impact.
That's beautiful. It's like her work took on a whole new meaning.
Yeah. And the book also talks about this conference where the author, kind of pretended to know his dream.
Mm-hmm.
And then a speaker said straight up that many people actually do know their dream, but they're just too scared to admit it.
That's a powerful statement.
It is. It's like that fear of vulnerability,
Yeah.
putting yourself out there and risking failure. It can really hold us back.
Definitely. But maybe the first step is just being honest with ourselves about what we really want.
Yeah. And then we come back to Jody Nolan again. After her husband Mike passed away, she went through this period of discouragement. But again, seeing how her work was helping people, it pulled her back.
It's like that purpose was a lifeline.
It was.
Yeah.
And she had this realization that God wastes nothing.
I love that.
She connected her past career at IBM to her current work. It's like all those seemingly random experiences can come together in ways we don't expect.
That's so encouraging.
Yeah.
It makes you realize that even those things that seem totally unrelated at the time can become part of our calling.
It's like this tapestry, with all these different threads.
Yeah. And the key takeaway here is that the risk of not committing to a path, even if it feels uncertain,
Right.
that's often greater than making a choice that might turn out to be, not quite right.
Because even if we stumble, we learn.
Exactly. We get valuable lessons along the way.
And then there's the story of young Walt Disney, who got this painful nail in his boot and had to rest.
Ouch.
I know, right? But guess what? That led him to decide to become a cartoonist.
What? Really?
Yeah. It's like sometimes these disruptions can create space for clarity.
That's fascinating. It reminds me of that quote. Every single thing that has ever happened in your life is preparing you for a moment that is yet to come.
Wow, that's good. I like that one.
Right. It's like those unexpected pauses, those interruptions, they can give us the chance to reflect and maybe shift our perspective.
Totally. And, another important point the book makes is that finding our calling isn't a solo mission.
Oh, yeah.
It often involves mentors and guides people who can offer support and wisdom.
For sure.
And the story of Ginny Fang really illustrates this. She became pregnant at 23 in Singapore as an unwed mother, which was incredibly challenging in her culture.
That must have been incredibly isolating.
It was. But she had this inner sense that she was on the right path, even though she was facing so much judgment and loneliness.
That's something to keep in mind, that mastering any skill, moving towards your calling, rarely happens in a vacuum.
Yeah, we need each other.
We do. Every journey benefits from the insights and support of others.
And then we meet Ellen, who runs this really hands-on art studio, and it's presented as a contrast to those more traditional passive forms of education.
Oh, interesting.
And this leads to what the book calls the Steve Jobs strategy, using your environment as a way to learn.
So it's like life becomes your classroom.
Exactly. It's about being curious and open to learning from every experience and everyone you meet.
I like that.
And, Steve Jobs auditing that calligraphy course is a perfect example.
Right.
Like, it seemed completely unrelated to his goals at the time, but it ended up influencing the design aesthetic of Apple.
That's amazing.
It is. And then there were his early collaborations with Steve Wozniak at Atari. Like, all these informal experiences shaped his path.
So it's not always about formal education.
Right. It's about that constant seeking out of knowledge and experience.
Makes sense.
So moving on, let's talk about painful practice.
Uh-oh. Sounds intense.
Haha. It is a little bit. This chapter is all about the idea that our calling isn't always going to be easy.
Right.
and that the real work of practice can reveal not only what we're good at, but also what we might not be suited for.
I could see that.
And the story of Stephanie Fisher really brings this home. She auditioned for American Idol 7 times.
Oh, wow.
I know, and each time it was a no, including some pretty harsh feedback from Simon Cowell.
Ouch.
Right? It was brutal. But then the book contrasts her experience with Hilary Scott from Lady Antebellum and Colby Kylat, who were also initially rejected by American Idol, but went on to have huge success in music.
So it's not always about that initial judgment.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes you wonder if maybe there are other factors at play, like timing or, the subjective opinions of others.
Or maybe the way you respond to that feedback.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then the author talks about his own experience with wanting to give up playing guitar.
Oh, yeah.
But his dad kind of pushed him to keep practicing.
So what happened?
He made unexpected progress.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes we need that little nudge to get us through those plateaus of frustration.
Yeah, and it highlights that whole idea of mindset, how our beliefs about ourselves can really impact our outcomes.
Absolutely. And the book introduces this concept of deliberate practice from a researcher named Kay Anders Erickson.
What's that all about?
So it's not just about mindless repetition.
Yeah.
Deliberate practice is about setting specific goals, focusing intently on areas you need to improve, getting feedback, and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
So it's a lot more intentional.
It is. And the book argues that being able to persevere through those tough parts, when it's not exciting anymore, that can be a sign you're on the right path.
Because you're truly dedicated.
Exactly. Because you love the work itself.
Makes sense.
But, the book also acknowledges that sometimes even deliberate practice doesn't lead to the desired outcome.
Right.
And sometimes amazing things happen without all that intense effort.
Oh, like what?
Like the story of Martin Chamberlain, who just seemed to have this natural talent for music.
Interesting.
So it's complex.
Yeah.
There's still a scientific understanding that some abilities might be more innate.
I guess that makes sense.
But the ultimate goal of practice isn't just about achieving skill. It's about being able to make a unique contribution in your field.
Mm.
And this raises a really interesting question. Is it possible to be successful at something that's not actually your calling?
That's a good question.
And the book uses the example of William Hung. Remember him? He auditioned for American Idol, and it didn't go so well.
Oh, yeah, I remember him. He was kind of famous for a while.
He was. And it's interesting because he did achieve a certain level of success, but was it really fulfilling?
Right. Was it really what he was meant to do?
It makes you think about the difference between external validation and that internal sense of purpose.
For sure.
So let's move on to Building Bridges with the subtitle, The Leap That Wasn't a Leap.
Okay.
This chapter is all about the idea that big changes often happen in small steps rather than one giant leap.
I could see that.
Yeah. And the story of Ben and Christy Carlson is a perfect example. They went from doing leadership development in South Africa to starting a coffee business in Burundi.
Wow. That's quite a change.
It is. They became social entrepreneurs in Burundi, which means they started a business with the goal of making a positive impact on the community, not just making money.
That's cool.
Yeah. And they didn't have this big master plan. They just knew it was time for a change and they saw an opportunity.
So they just went for it.
They did. Christy described their leap as gangly, imperfect, headlong.
Haha. I love that.
It wasn't this perfectly calculated move. It was more like an intuitive response to an opportunity.
And that resonates with a lot of the big decisions we make in life, right?
Yeah, it does. It's often a mix of, gut feeling intention and a willingness to embrace the unknown.
Makes sense.
And this connects to the idea that finding your calling isn't just about knowing, but about choosing and acting.
Even without all the answers.
Yeah, and the story of Hannah and the birth of Samuel from the Bible, it shows that sometimes we need to learn how to recognize our calling in the first place.
Right. It can be a process.
It is. And the book breaks it down into 3 stages: hearing the call, responding with action, and then beginning to believe.
That last one is interesting.
It is. It's like the work comes before the feeling of being completely ready.
It's like we have to take that first step even if we're not sure.
Exactly. And the book emphasizes that feelings alone can be unreliable.
Oh,
You
yeah.
need to test them against, the wisdom of others and through preparation.
It's like we need to check our gut with our head.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the author shares this funny story about writing a song to ask Lane out. I know, right? It's a perfect illustration of how we can sometimes get caught up in these romanticized versions of our dreams without doing the real work.
It's like we skip over all the hard parts.
Totally. And the truth is, relationships, like anything worth pursuing, take time and effort and, those not so glamorous moments.
So true. And going back to Ben and Christy Carlson, their coffee business in Burundi is about so much more than just coffee.
Right. It's about making a difference in that community.
Exactly.
Their why was bigger than just personal comfort or profit.
They were driven by something more.
They were. And Christy clarified that they didn't feel this, grand call to do something greater.
Oh, interesting.
They just wanted to use their skills in a way that contributed to something meaningful.
It's like they saw an opportunity and said, hey, we can help with that.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that a calling doesn't have to be this huge dramatic thing.
Yeah, it can be about making a difference wherever you are with what you have.
Absolutely. Now let's dive into pivot points with the subtitle, Why Failure is Your Friend.
I'm intrigued already.
Haha, it's a good one. This chapter is all about how obstacles and even failures can actually lead us to success.
Like a redirection.
Exactly. And the story of Matt McWilliams is a perfect example. He lost his golf scholarship and ended up working for his dad at a golf course.
Wow.
I know, right? But while he was there, he started using online marketing to try and attract students, even though he didn't enjoy teaching.
So he found a skill he was good at.
He did.
Yeah.
And it eventually led him to partner in this really successful lead generation company for insurance companies.
That's amazing.
It is. And it's funny because he wasn't even that excited about insurance at first.
It's like life had other plans.
It did. And then there's the story of Groupon, which started as a failed philanthropy project called The Point.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't until the 2008 recession hit that they pivoted to group discounts out of necessity.
So their failure led to their success.
It did. And the book really hammers home this point, that successful people and organizations often succeed because of failure, not in spite of it.
It's about learning from those experiences.
Exactly. And we have another example, Samuel Johnson. He had all these early stumbles in law malting business before he found his calling in writing and public engagement.
It's like he had to try a few things before he found his niche.
He did. And the author's conversation with Matt McWilliams really stuck with me.
What did they talk about?
They realized that feeling lost and far from your purpose might actually mean you're on the right track closer than you think.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
It is. It's like those moments of frustration can actually be signs that we're about to break through.
It's encouraging.
It is. And the book emphasizes that a calling is an ongoing process of submitting to a larger purpose. It's not a one-time thing.
It's a journey.
It is. And it's okay to fail, miss the mark,
Yeah.
change directions,
As long as we keep learning.
Exactly. It's about taking action, not just dreaming.
So true.
Now, for the final chapter, The Portfolio Life, subtitled A New Kind of Mastery.
Okay, this sounds interesting.
It is. It's about viewing our work not as a single job, but as this dynamic collection of interests and activities.
Like a portfolio.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Charles Handy, he outlined 5 different types of work: fee work, salary work, homework, study work, and gift work.
Gift work? What's that?
That's like volunteering or acts of kindness, unpaid work that we do because it's meaningful.
Oh, I like that.
It broadens our understanding of what work can be, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And Handy suggests that portfolio people should think about their time in terms of days in a year rather than just hours in a week.
Interesting.
It encourages a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
It's not just about our jobs. It's about our whole lives.
I like that perspective.
Me too.
Yeah.
And the book also touches on this sad fact that some people only figure out their purpose at the end of their lives.
Oh, wow.
I know. And then there's this great quote from Charles Handy. Reinvent yourself every 10 years.
That's inspiring.
It is. And he asked this question, what do you secretly want to do? Do it.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. It's a call to action,
Don't wait.
Exactly. And seeing our calling as a portfolio can help us create more harmony and clarity.
Yeah, because it allows us to integrate all those different parts of ourselves.
Yeah. But the book also reminds us that when we do answer a call, we have a responsibility to do it well.
Right, to strive for excellence.
Exactly. And then there's this incredibly moving story about the author visiting Sam in rural Uganda.
Okay.
So Sam's living in extreme poverty, but he has this very clear goal.
What is it?
He wants to earn enough money to send his deaf son to a special school and to build a better house.
That's incredible.
It is, and he's working so hard with very little resources. The author realized that poverty isn't just about material things.
Right.
It can also be a mindset.
And Sam had this incredible spirit and determination.
He did. It makes you think about how we can bring that same sense of generosity and purpose to our own work.
Totally, regardless of our circumstances.
Exactly. And then the author gets really personal. He talks about how after leaving his job with savings, he actually felt lost and depressed. Yeah, because his work had been his whole identity.
Makes sense.
And it highlights that we need purpose beyond just, a paycheck.
We need something to strive for.
We do. And then there's the story of his friend Stu, who used his financial success to help people in Africa.
Wow, that's inspiring.
It is. It's like he found a way to use his resources to make a difference.
Yeah, and that brings us to the story from Mr. Holland's Opus. Remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
The music teacher who wanted to be a famous composer?
Right, and he felt like he'd wasted his life.
Yeah.
But in the end, he realized that he had this profound impact on his students.
It's like those everyday interactions, those small acts of kindness can be the most meaningful part of our calling.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of that John Lennon quote, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans."
So good.
Right? It's like a shift in perspective. It's not just about achieving something grand. It's about becoming a good person and letting that goodness ripple out into the world.
Beautifully said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the art of work, it seems like the book is saying that the path to our life's work is already there uniquely for each of us.
Like it's unfolding.
Yeah, and we have the story of Gloria, who became a teacher for children in poverty and found so much meaning in that work.
And Ed, who worked at a mission and showed kindness in these subtle ways.
Exactly. And then there's this contrast between Ernest Hemingway, who felt despair for not fulfilling his artistic potential, and Tolkien's character Nigel, whose unfinished work was kind of completed in the afterlife.
Wow.
Right? It suggests that our efforts might have a lasting impact beyond what we can even see.
I like that.
Me too. And finally, the author shares his own experience of working on this honor code in college. He faced all these obstacles, but he eventually passed the work on to others to finish.
It's a good reminder that we don't have to do it all alone.
We don't.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most fulfilling thing is to start something and let others carry it forward.
It's about leaving a legacy.
It is. So as you go about your day, think about this. Success isn't just about what you achieve in your lifetime. It's also about what you leave behind. That might just be the truest measure of your calling.
That's a great takeaway.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.